it is good not to involve yourself in wasting your time, if you like, in too much materialism. It tends to get in the way of your spiritual life, in all honesty.
I,
Obviously,
I, I
some
like
of it is.
I like the term penny pincher. Don't be a penny pincher. Have you picked that up in his letter?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, good to be
So
generous. Very good to be generous
yeah,
and open heart.
I like the term
Yeah,
penny
that's
pincher. I laughed when I read that. Yeah. Oh, thank
yeah,
you. So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's good. Egyptians don't have any issues with not being generous. I've found they're very generous by nature. That's good. Um, yeah. So what else? Yeah. So in other words, being poor or less materialism does not necessarily mean we are unproductive. Because we read in the Bible, alms delivers from death. So if we have excess like funds, we can do some good with it. Giving to other people, those in need. That God, it seems like He gives us a credit for those types of actions, good deeds, and you do it in love, of course, not just. It's not like a contract. It's not like an exchange, but it's you do it in love. Yeah, acts of love, any acts of love, is like a credit before God.
Roberts, it's
Uh,
yeah. It's listening to this, he sounds like St. Paul was definitely one of his spiritual guides or role models. And I think for us as young youth, not me and Joe, but the rest of the class, the beauty of a role model in your spiritual life and growth. Who else was key influences for St. Polycarp?
who else was what? Sorry.
Key influences or role models in his spiritual life for St. Polycarp? It sounds like very much St. Paul definitely was. Listening to some of what you've said in terms of, the spirits of long suffering, patience and
Mm,
love, that's direct from St. Paul's epistle to the Philippians.
yeah,
There's a few other
yeah, yeah,
quotes that you've said that are direct quotes from St. Paul's epistles, but who else really
yeah.
guides?
Exactly. I think you'll find Saint John the Beloved. That was his diocese, if you like, at that time. What was it? Ephesus, I think it was. Yeah, that he resided in. He would have still been alive at that time. So around 85 AD was roughly when this was written. In roughly the same time that you have the letters of Ignatius of Syria to all the different churches on his way to martyrdom as well. Yeah, so around that same time, yeah. So Saint John the Beloved would have been a very strong influence, no doubt, for sure, as well as Saint Paul, definitely. So those two were probably the main two, I would think, amongst others as well that he came across. Um, yeah, so he says some nice things about Saint Paul. He says, "Neither I nor any other such one can come to the wisdom of the blessed and glorified Paul." Um, yeah, so yeah, indeed, Saint Paul had enormous wisdom and knowledge of the scriptures. That's true. Yeah. Um, yeah. So yeah, it's good. It's yeah. You can see such humility actually in Polycarp all throughout a genuine love and humility, and that's it's so good actually. I really enjoy that, and even that plus the fact that there seems to be no distinguishing of Christians in this part of the world versus that part of the world. It's basically one body in just in different areas basically. So one body, one church. That's what I really like. He first tried to uh, run away from persecution to a certain extent until it became too severe and too obvious that it was God's will, and then he accepted God's will. They came and arrested him and took him to the Colosseum in public execution, like in a Colosseum type environment. Um, and he had a prophecy that he would be burned alive, and that's what eventually happened. And so they burnt him at the stake. And you read about it, and it says that he doesn't seem to be harmed by the fire. The fire wrapped around him like a big shroud, like a big circle all around him, and it was like a loaf cooking in the oven type of thing. That's what everyone was marveling at it, and then eventually he didn't seem to be dying from that. So someone came along and stabbed him, and so much blood came out that it put the fire out, and and then he died instantly. And I think a bird flew away or something like that. So yeah, so it's a very dramatic type
Yes.
of preaching.
Yeah. Some
type of witness.
commentators actually made a comparison between Saint Polycarp's martyrdom and Jesus going to the cross,
Yeah,
because
you're right, Joe. Yeah.
Saint Polycarp, one, he was a leader, a really big leader in his time. So he had a huge following and a huge influence. And so the authorities really wanted to get hold of him because he was going to be their prize, their number one prize. If they can get him crucified, that means all the people who follow him will just, break away and fall away. So he was a big prize. Secondly, when they were actually taking him to the place where they're going to execute him, they put him on a donkey, and people were making similarity between Jesus coming into Jerusalem riding on a colt or a donkey, and they did the same with Polycarp. And also, when they burnt him, obviously Jesus wasn't burnt; he was crucified. But when they burnt Polycarp, it was like an oven. Okay. And as Rob just said, the fire didn't actually touch him. So the fire was like a bubble around him, and he wasn't burnt at all. So his clothes wasn't burnt. One of the soldiers came with a spear and pierced him. And actually, what happened? So much blood came out of him that it actually extinguished the fire. Now, when we say fire, this wasn't just the small fire they had. This was like a huge flame, and it all got extinguished from his blood. And one of the observers who actually wrote the life of Polycarp saw Polycarp like a bread or bun inside the oven. Yeah, he saw him like a offering, a bread offering. So it's very nice. And just by reading about Polycarp, I think there's just blessings in that. These are really these are saints who are with us today. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true, Joe. Yeah, and also he was arrested on what they call, even in that day, they called it a greater Sabbath. So it was like a high Sabbath, or the same as like Christ. It was
I forgot to mention he was betrayed as well.
Betrayed,
so he knew that they were coming after him, and he was moving from house to house. But one of the people who was with him betrayed him. So it's like Judas betraying Jesus. Yeah. It's a fascinating and amazing story, actually. It's the greatest honor. He heard a voice telling him from heaven to Polycarp, play the man, or take the role of Christ, in other words, from God. So in other words, obviously God takes pleasure in that sort of thing when we imitate Christ, and it's the greatest reward and blessing when we imitate the things of Christ as well, especially that's such a high level that Polycarp did. Can I just sort of make a comparison to somebody totally different? St. Peter. Okay, it's said that St. Peter he knew that they were after him to crucify or to kill him. Okay, he didn't know crucify, and was it that he ran away?
Yes, he tried to escape Rome
escape.
And then Christ appeared carrying his cross, saying, like he must be crucified again. So in other words, he gave him the impression that I want you to go back and accept your ending the ending that I accepted. I want you to accept it as well. Yeah.
So St. Peter tried to escape the martyrdom, which is like a natural sort of thing to do, right? If somebody's trying to kill you and they're outside, you're going to jump out the window and go throughout the street, right? And that's what St. Peter was doing. And then he had a vision that Christ was carrying his cross, and St. Peter said to him, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to be crucified again." And then St. Peter knew, oops, that message is from me. by escaping from persecution, I'm actually crucifying Christ again. Whereas St. Polycarp here, we see the exact opposite. We see St. Polycarp reliving the enactment of the crucifixion, but not actually as a crucifixion, but reliving the enactment of suffering for God to honor God. Do you see the difference? So if we run away from suffering, we are actually running away from God.
That's a good point, Joe. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, actually, yeah, I mean, nobody likes suffering, but if it's part of service to God, a necessary service to God, then it becomes a good thing, becomes a reward. Yeah. Waiting for us, actually. Yeah. Yeah. So
Thanks, Rob.
thanks.